In the quiet residential area of Brookline, morning mist hung heavily in the air. Our Victorian mansion was already bustling with activity earlier than usual. Through the large dining room windows, adorned with traditional Shaker-style furniture, the accumulated snow gleamed with a bluish-white hue. "Mom, are we going to Grandma's house today?" As I was warming bagels in the kitchen, Lily came rushing down the stairs. Still in her pajamas, my 5-year-old daughter's eyes lit up at the mention of her beloved grandmother. Before marriage, I worked as an accountant, but now I dedicate myself fully to caring for my family as a full-time homemaker. "Yes, Grandma says she has something important to discuss about the company. But first, you need to change out of those pajamas." At the breakfast table, my husband Thomas was already seated, occasionally checking his smartphone while browsing through the Wall Street Journal. As vice president of Brown Furniture, he had been particularly busy lately. Managing a long-established company with annual sales of $50 million was no easy task. Thomas looked up from his newspaper, facing a bagel spread with cream cheese and a glass of orange juice. "Carol, don't you think something's off with Mother? She's been acting restless at the company too," Thomas remarked as he set down his coffee cup. Indeed, my mother-in-law Grace had been noticeably tired lately. As the head of a furniture manufacturer with over 100 years of history, she must have been under considerable pressure. "Your mother does seem tired lately. But I'm sure seeing Lily, who adores her grandmother, will cheer her up." "Yes. But she still shows no sign of letting go of management control. She doesn't trust us." Just then, Thomas's sister Sarah appeared. As the company's financial director, she always presented herself impeccably. Today, too, she arrived at the breakfast table looking smart in a navy-tailored suit. "Good morning, everyone. Today's board meeting is very important. I'm really worried about Mother lately." There was something elusive in Sarah's expression beneath her usual pleasantness. Her words seemed tinged with superficial concern. "Is Aunt Sarah going to Grandma's too?" At Lily's innocent question, Sarah's expression hardened for a moment, but she quickly recovered her gentle smile. "Yes, of course. I need to help Grandma with her work." That afternoon, we were struck by a sudden phone call. Grace had collapsed in her office and was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital. When I received the call, a chill ran down my spine. At the hospital, we received a grave diagnosis. The middle-aged doctor in his white coat faced us with a serious expression. "Mrs. Brown's condition is not stable. Her heart appears to be under strain. We need to run more detailed tests. I'll stay and take care of her. I'll delegate my accounting duties to my staff and remain here." Sarah was the first to volunteer. Thomas silently stared at the wall, while Lily anxiously gripped my hand. Beyond the hospital room door, numerous medical devices quietly beeped. A week later, we received another call from the hospital. Outside, the leaden February sky stretched out in what's known as the February blues. "Last night, Mrs. Brown passed away peacefully." The nurse's voice resonated heavily through the receiver. At this sudden news, my mind went blank. Lily suddenly spoke in a trembling voice. "Mom, I can hear Grandma's voice, like she's trying to say something." I embraced my daughter while trying to hide my distress. Outside the window, the harsh New England winter sky hung heavy and gray. Cold February rain poured down on the crematorium at Mount Auburn Cemetery. Established in 1831, this prestigious cemetery is known as the final resting place for Massachusetts's notable families. Inside the Gothic-style red brick building, the Brown family gathered quietly. Through the large windows, the winter bare trees shrouded in drizzle made today's farewell ceremony feel even more lonely. I stood in my black mourning dress, holding Lily's small hand. About 50 people had gathered, including local dignitaries, Brown furniture executives, and relatives. Thomas, dressed in a sophisticated black suit, spoke quietly with company officials. His expression revealed more anxiety than grief. Sarah remained downcast behind her black veil, her hands clutching her expensive handbag with unnecessary force. The room was lined with Shaker-style wooden chairs that Grace had always favored, each piece seemingly telling the story of her passion for the company. Brass plates recording past cremations lined the walls, their historical weight adding to the solemnity of the occasion. "The cremation will now begin." A solemn voice echoed through the quiet hall, and all attendees turned to face forward. On the altar sat a top-grade coffin made of maple wood. Ironically, it was a masterpiece crafted by Brown Furniture's own artisans. The coffin's surface beautifully displayed the traditional wood grain pattern that Grace had loved. "Lily, let's say goodbye to Grandma." As I whispered these words, Lily approached the coffin with an anxious expression. Outside, the rain intensified, hitting the old building's stained glass windows with a sound like church organ pipes. Lily's black dress made her young frame appear even smaller. "Mom." Lily's voice trembled. Her large eyes mixed with anxiety and fear. "What is it?" "Grandma. Grandma is trying to get up." Those words froze my spine. An elderly relative sitting nearby clicked their tongues softly. Sarah stood up and spoke quickly, her heels breaking the silence. "Lily, you shouldn't say such things. You'll make everyone sad." Sarah's voice mixed something like panic with her usual gentleness. However, Lily continued to stare intently at the coffin with wide eyes. Her serious gaze seemed beyond that of a young child. "No. I can hear Grandma's voice. She's saying, 'Help me.'" Lily's cry echoed throughout the hall. Her voice reverberated off the high ceiling as if being repeated multiple times. As the attendees began to stir, Thomas approached with a stern expression. Fine beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead. "Carol, take Lily outside." At that moment, 3 police cars with Cambridge police markings screeched to a halt in front of the crematorium. The sound of sirens mixed with the rain, and the entire building was bathed in ominous red and blue lights. These lights filtered through the stained glass windows, creating an almost kaleidoscopic scene inside the hall. "Stop the cremation immediately." Police officers in uniform burst into the hall. The heavy wooden doors swung open forcefully, letting in a rush of cold air. The blood drained from Sarah's face, and Thomas froze for a moment with wide eyes. His hands, adorned with expensive cufflinks, visibly trembled. "Open the coffin!" another officer shouted. Screams erupted from the attendees as a wave of shock spread through the room. The priest from First Church in Cambridge stared at the officers with a bewildered expression. The Bible in his hands trembled slightly. "By what authority?" "We have proper." Cutting off Thomas's protests, a man stepped forward displaying his detective badge. His serious gaze spoke to the gravity of the situation. "The warrant is right here. This is an investigation order based on an internal whistleblower from Massachusetts General Hospital." At those words, Sarah let out a small cry. Her expensive pearl necklace quivered against her trembling neck. As officers approached the coffin and slowly began to open the lid, a heavy silence dominated the hall, and someone could be heard gasping. Grace's body lay peacefully wrapped in luxurious white cloth. Her serene expression made her appear as if in deep sleep. And then, "Check for a pulse." Paramedics rushed forward and quickly began their examination. The moment their hands touched her neck, they exclaimed with wide eyes. Their professional demeanor instantly changed to one of shock. "There's a pulse." The room froze. Outside, the rain intensified, and the sound of it hitting the stained glass windows echoed like thunder. Someone dropped a Bible, the sound resonating unusually loud. "Get an ambulance immediately. Bring oxygen masks and emergency kits." Amidst the chaos, the paramedics began their swift response. Grace's body was transferred to a stretcher and rushed to the ambulance. As the white cloth slipped slightly, an expensive watch on her wrist caught a faint glimmer of light. I stood still, holding Lily tightly, watching in shock. I could see Thomas and Sarah's figures trembling slightly in the corner of the room, surrounded by police officers. Their expressions no longer held any pretense of composure. "Mom, Grandma's alive, isn't she?" At Lily's question, I nodded while holding back tears. I could feel her small body slowly relaxing with a sigh of relief. The fate of the Brown family, proud of its 100-year history, was about to take a dramatic turn. In the intensive care unit of Massachusetts General Hospital, a heavy atmosphere filled the disinfectant-scented hallway. Outside the window, the evening sky began to turn purple. As we waited for visiting hours, the chief physician opened his mouth gravely. We detected a large amount of sleeping medication, zolpidem. 5 times the normal dosage. At these words, the waiting room fell deadly silent. Lily had fallen asleep on my lap. Her soft breathing sounded strangely loud in the tense atmosphere. "There's an even more serious issue," the doctor continued with furrowed brows. "We received an internal report from a former nurse, and significant tampering with medication records has been discovered." Detective Johnson stepped forward, fixing us with a stern gaze. "Miss Sarah Brown, you apparently spent an unusually long time in your mother's room on the day of the incident." Sarah's face turned pale. Her fingers, with their expensive manicure, trembled slightly. "That was, to take care of Mother." According to nursing records, you entered the room twice during 4 change times. However, there were no scheduled 4 changes during those times. Beyond the hospital room, medical equipment continued its regular beeping. Grace had not yet regained consciousness. "Please tell me again about that day in detail." The detective turned to face me. I traced my memories. That day, there had certainly been something off. The unnatural glances exchanged between Thomas and Sarah, the small sounds from the hospital room, and above all, Lily's worried expression. "Actually," I began, choosing my words carefully. "The day before Grace collapsed, I saw my husband and Sarah having a private conversation in the study. I saw Sarah entering the study late at night, a place she normally never enters. Just then, hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway. We have crucial testimony." A young detective appeared with documents in hand. "Dr. Johnson has confessed. He was paid $500,000 to falsify the death certificate." The air in the waiting room instantly froze. Sarah's handbag fell to the floor with a clatter. A small medicine bottle rolled out. "Sarah!" Thomas's voice rang out at an unusual pitch. Suddenly, there was a commotion from the hospital room. "The patient is regaining consciousness," a nurse's voice echoed down the hallway. As we rushed into the room, Grace was slowly opening her eyes. Surrounded by tubes and medical equipment, she began to speak in a weak voice. "That day, Sarah brought me medicine. Thomas said, 'This will solve everything.'" Grace's words made the air in the hospital room heavy. Outside the window, street lights were beginning to illuminate one by one. "Mother, Sarah's voice trembled. But no more words followed. The detectives moved quickly, surrounding Thomas and Sarah. "We'd like both of you to cooperate with a voluntary questioning." At that moment, Lily woke up and rushed into the hospital room. "Grandma." Grace smiled faintly at the sight of her granddaughter. "Lily. I could hear your voice in that darkness." As nurses bustled about, I stood staring out the window with my hand on Lily's shoulder. In the night sky, a new moon cast a thin light. And the dark shadow that had fallen over the Brown family was slowly beginning to take shape. In the police interrogation room, surveillance camera footage was presented one after another. Sarah leaving the pharmacy, Thomas having a secret meeting with the doctor, and the decisive evidence, the moment Sarah manipulated the 4 in Grace's hospital room, was clearly recorded. "This will require formal questioning on attempted murder charges," the detective's voice rang cold. Thomas collapsed into a chair, and Sarah covered her face with her hands. Their ambition had nearly driven their beloved mother to death. That cruel truth was about to come to light. And I sighed deeply, thinking about the long legal battle ahead and the irreparably torn family's future. Lily's small hand gripped mine tightly. "Mom, what's going to happen now?" I was lost for words at that innocent question. The final judgment of the Brown family was about to begin in the Massachusetts Supreme Court. Grace sat in a wheelchair, quietly looking ahead. Though the image of the dignified businesswoman had faded, her gaze still held strong determination. I stood beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Let us begin the witness examination. The judge's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged courtroom. As the first witness, Dr. Johnson took the stand. His graying hair seemed to have whitened even more over the past month. Please explain in detail about Mrs. Brown's death certificate. The prosecutor asked quietly. The courtroom was so silent you could hear a pin drop. I received $500,000 in cash from defendant Sarah Brown and participated in falsifying the death certificate. The doctor's voice trembled. A slight murmur arose from the gallery. Please tell us the specific circumstances. Last December, defendant Sarah Brown visited my office. She began talking about the company's management rights and the inheritance of approximately $20 million in personal assets. The doctor removed his glasses and wiped his sweat as he continued. Later, defendant Thomas Brown joined in, and the plan became more concrete. My role was to make death by sleeping pill overdose appear as natural causes. In the courtroom, evidence was presented one after another. Surveillance camera footage, phone records, bank transaction details. And the decisive evidence, the empty sleeping pill bottle found in Sarah's handbag. All the pieces fit together with terrifying precision. Defendant Sarah Brown, the judge called out in an authoritative voice. Take the stand. Sarah, who had lost her former beauty, stood up unsteadily. Even her luxury brand suit could no longer hide the devastation in her heart. I'll tell everything. Sarah's voice was thin and trembling. My brother and I, dissatisfied with the company's management policy, began planning around last summer. Mother didn't trust our management abilities. The testimony continued mercilessly. Plans hatched during sleepless nights, betrayed family trust, and conscience that remained silent until the final moment. Everything was being revealed in this courtroom. I prepared the medication. I mixed it into the 4 during the nurse's shift change. After that, cremation was supposed to completely destroy the evidence. Sarah's voice caught. In the gallery, longtime business partners and employees stared at her in disbelief. Defendant Thomas Brown, now the prosecutor, turned a stern gaze. What was your role? The elite vice president's dignity was now nowhere to be seen. Thomas slumped his shoulders and answered in a hoarse voice. I prepared the doctor's payment and rushed the cremation arrangements. Pretending it was a final act of filial duty. At those words, Grace let out a small sigh. I instinctively gripped her shoulder tightly. Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened, and small footsteps echoed. Lily. This isn't. Before anyone could stop her, Lily ran to her grandmother's wheelchair and jumped into her lap. Grandma, were you scared? Could you hear my voice back then? The courtroom froze for a moment. Even the judge was at a loss for words at this unexpected event. Grace, gently embracing her granddaughter, slowly began to speak. Yes, I could hear you. In the darkness, your voice alone kept me connected to the world of the living. At those words, sobs could be heard from the gallery. Even the prosecutor lowered his eyes for a moment. Thomas, Sarah, Grace spoke quietly. I wanted to entrust the company's future to you. But before that, I wanted you to learn something more important. Honesty, compassion, and above all, love for family. The siblings in the defendant's box wept with their heads bowed deeply. Outside the window, the first spring rain had begun to fall quietly. The sentence was as per the prosecution's request, 15 years in prison. Through a plea bargain, Dr. Johnson received a suspended sentence. As we left the courthouse, reporters surrounded us. Amidst the camera flashes, Grace quietly moved forward in her wheelchair. Lily held her grandmother's hand with an innocent smile like that of an angel. Carol, Grace called to me before getting into the car. I want you to help with the company. Using your experience as a former accountant. I nodded deeply at those words. The spring rain continued to fall gently, as if washing everything away. On the way home, Lily asked curiously, Mom, why did Uncle and Aunt Sarah do such a thing? I answered carefully, choosing my words. Sometimes, adults lose sight of what's important. But pure hearts like yours guide us back to the right path. 1 year later, Massachusetts spring had brought pale pink blossoms to the cherry trees. From the window of Brown Furniture's new headquarters, I gazed at the spire of First Church in Cambridge. Carol, could you review the first-year financial statements? Turning at Grace's voice, I found her at her desk with the same dignified presence as ever. Now fully recovered from her hospitalization, she was working more energetically than before. Yes. The new Shaker style collection is performing better than expected. I'm utilizing my accounting experience as CFO, helping to rebuild the company. We're beginning to walk a new path, balancing tradition with innovation. Mom, look. 6-year-old Lily was sitting in a new children's rocking chair. It was a special piece made by the craftsman, a masterpiece that inherited Grace's cherished traditional design while adding contemporary elements. What a lovely chair, I smiled, and Lily nodded proudly. Grandma says this is a memory chair. It has the same design as the chair I used to sit in when I was little. A gentle light dwelled in Grace's eyes. Since the incident, her bond with Lily had grown even stronger. It's almost visiting time. At Grace's words, we began to prepare. It's about a 30-minute drive to Suffolk County Correctional Facility. Daffodils peeked out along the roadside, drawn by the spring weather. In the prison visiting room, Thomas and Sarah, dressed in orange prison uniforms, were waiting for us. A year of incarceration seemed to have changed not only their appearance but also their inner selves. Mother. Carol. Lily. Thomas's voice no longer held its former arrogance. Instead, it was tinged with deep remorse. How is the company? Sarah asked timidly. It's doing well, Grace answered calmly. But that's not all I wanted to tell you. She slowly opened her bag and took out a photograph. It was an old picture taken in their great-grandfather's time, the founder's era. The young Brown family members smiled in front of their furniture workshop. Our family has walked alongside furniture. But there was something even more important that I failed to convey properly. Grace's voice echoed quietly. Furniture warmly embraces people's hearts. But that warmth can only come from the maker's love. Thomas, Sarah, I bear great responsibility for not teaching you that. A heavy silence fell over the visiting room. Large tears fell from Sarah's eyes. Mother. I'm so sorry. Don't cry, Uncle, Lily spoke up. I always liked the chairs you made. Let's make them together again someday. At those innocent words, Thomas choked up. As the bell signaling the end of visiting hours rang, we said our goodbyes with promises to meet again. On the way back, the scenery through the car window looked completely different. Though it was the same route, it seemed touched by rays of hope. Hey, Mom, Lily called from the back seat. Uncle and Aunt Sarah have changed, haven't they? Yes, I answered with a smile. People can be reborn when they acknowledge their mistakes and truly repent. Grace nodded silently while gazing into the distance. The scene reflected in her eyes must surely be the story of our family's new beginning. We stopped the car under the cherry trees at Mount Auburn Cemetery. The events that occurred here a year ago now felt like distant memories. Let's take a photo here, Grace suggested. We smiled for the picture under the fully bloomed cherry trees. Cherry blossoms danced in the wind. Each petal seemed to be creating our new memories. When we returned to the mansion in Brookline, we could hear the bells announcing evening time. In the reception room, an old rocking chair from great-grandfather's time stood bathed in the sunset. Lily gently sat in the chair and closed her eyes. Hey, Mom. I can hear lots of voices from this chair. They all sound happy. I gently stroked my daughter's head while exchanging glances with Grace. Outside the window, birds announcing the new season filled the air with their songs. This is the beginning of our new story. The first step in the warm record of a family walking forward with forgiveness, having overcome their mistakes. On the reception room shelf sat the last chair Thomas and Sarah had made, quietly. On its backrest was a small engraving. For our family, with love. The setting sun cast a gentle light on those words.